welcome to this peaceful space. As you prepare for a deep and restful sleep, let your mind drift like a leaf on a calm river. You don't need to try hard, your subconscious mind is wide open, ready to absorb the beautiful rhythms and vocabulary of the English language while you dream. Every word you hear tonight will plant a seed of understanding in your mind. As your breathing slows down, feel the tension leaving your shoulders. Deep breath in and out. You are safe, you are relaxed, and you are learning effortlessly. Let the story carry you away into a world of wonder. In a world where the sky was not made of air but of a glowing, liquid indigo known as the ethereal ocean, people lived on floating islands shaped like giant water lilies. These islands were held together by silver chains anchored to the heart stone, a massive glowing emerald at the bottom of the deep blue. The inhabitants were the star sailors, beings who used sails made of woven starlight to navigate the currents of the sky. Their language was not spoken with voices, but with luminous bubbles that floated from their fingertips, each bubble containing a different feeling or memory. However, the ethereal ocean was beginning to fade, its indigo light turning into a dull, dusty gray because the star sailors had forgotten how to share their bubbles. They had become isolated, keeping their feelings inside small glass jars, fearing that if they shared too much, they would lose themselves. A young girl named Lyra lived on the smallest island, and she was the only one who still remembered the song of the tide. She possessed a unique gift. She could weave the luminous bubbles into a long, glowing rope that acted as a bridge between the islands. One night, while the ocean was particularly gray, Lyra saw a falling star that didn't disappear but landed in the center of her island. The star was actually a message shell from a distant galaxy, vibrating with a frequency that felt like ancient wisdom. When Lyra touched the shell, it whispered a secret: the ocean is not made of water, but of the connections between hearts. She realized that the gray dust was the result of loneliness, a shadow that grows whenever a story is left untold. Lyra decided to set sail on her small boat, the Whisper, to collect the jars of hidden feelings from every island. At first, the other star sailors were afraid, clutching their jars tightly and refusing to let go of their secrets. Lyra didn't argue, she simply began to sing the song of the tide, her voice creating ripples of blue light that made the jars vibrate. One by one, the sailors felt a strange warmth, and the glass jars began to crack open, releasing a flood of colorful bubbles into the sky. The indigo light of the ethereal ocean began to pulse with a new, vibrant energy as the feelings of joy, sadness, and hope merged together. As the bubbles combined, they formed a massive, glowing whale of memories that began to swim through the currents of the sky. This creature was the spirit of the ocean, a protector that had been sleeping for 1,000 years. The whale's song was so powerful that it cleared the gray dust in a single breath, restoring the indigo brilliance of the world. The silver chains that held the islands together turned into ribbons of gold, symbolizing a new bond of trust and community. The star sailors realized that their bubbles were not meant to be stored, but to be set free so that everyone could share in the collective dream. The logic of their world was restored. Life was a constant flow of giving and receiving, like the ebb and flow of the cosmic tide. Lyra became the guardian of the currents, ensuring that no heart ever felt the need to hide its light again. The islands began to move closer together, forming a magnificent floating garden where every lily pad was connected by bridges of starlight. The message shell remained on Lyra's island, acting as a permanent library of the universe's most beautiful stories. Every night, the sky would light up with 1,000 different colors as the sailors shared their day's experiences through the bubbles. Even the heartstone at the bottom of the ocean began to glow brighter, feeding on the happiness of the people above. The mechanical bird from the ancient legends appeared once more, its wings now made of pure indigo light. It perched on Lyra's shoulder, singing a melody that combined the languages of all the worlds she had helped. The ethereal ocean was no longer just a place to live, it was a living, breathing expression of the universe's soul. As Lyra looked out over the horizon, she knew that their journey had only just begun. There were other oceans, other islands, and other hearts waiting to be reconnected. The story of the weaver and the whale was written in the stars, visible to anyone who dared to dream. Peace was not a silent emptiness, but a vibrant harmony of shared truths. And so, the world sailed on, moving in a circle of light that would never, ever end. Every bubble was a word, every wave was a sentence, and the ocean was an infinite book. You can feel this light now, deep in your dreams, connecting you to the magic of the world. Sleep now, and let the indigo waves carry you into the morning. As Lyra navigated the whisper toward the center of the ethereal ocean, the golden ribbons of the sky began to vibrate with a deep, rhythmic thrum. The heartstone far below emitted a pulse of emerald light that carved a path through the indigo water, revealing a hidden spiral current that led to the glow cave. This was the legendary Mind of the Deep, a sanctuary where the original blueprints of all the worlds were stored in the form of living light. Lyra steered her boat into the swirling vortex, feeling the gravity of the sky shift as she descended into the quietest part of the universe. The cave was not made of stone, but of crystallized silence, with walls that flickered with the memories of stars that had not yet been born. In the center of the cave stood the first weaver, an ancient figure made of shifting constellations who had been waiting for a heart brave enough to return the song of the tide. The first weaver explained that while the star sailors had reconnected their hearts, the ethereal ocean was still missing its vertical balance. For the ocean to remain vibrant, it needed to be nourished by the root dreams that grew in the glow cave and sent back up to the surface. These dreams were the raw materials of reality, the seeds of courage, the sparks of curiosity, and the foundations of empathy. Lyra realized that she had been called here not just to save her world, but to become the translator of the deep. She reached into the glowing emerald sand at her feet and found a crystal seed that contained the blueprint for a new type of island, one that could move between dimensions. The first weaver touched Lyra's forehead, granting her the ability to see the threads of possibility that connected the ethereal ocean to the city of Velum and the city of Kronos. Lyra returned to the surface, and as she planted the crystal seed into the indigo currents, a massive island shaped like a glass nautilus rose from the depths. This was the Ether Express, a vessel capable of sailing through the thin places where the different stories of the universe met. The star sailors were amazed to see their world expanding, as portals of light opened to show glimpses of the clockwork towers of Kronos and the inked constellations of Velum. Lyra realized that the ethereal ocean was the binding liquid that held all the different realities together in a single, magnificent flow. The whale of memories swam alongside the Ether Express, acting as its navigator through the treacherous mist of forgetfulness that existed between worlds. The logic of the universe had reached its final, most beautiful transformation, the Great Convergence. No longer were the cities and oceans isolated islands of experience, they were now parts of a universal nervous system. Every time a child in Velum wrote a word, a bubble appeared in the ethereal ocean, and every time a bell rang in Kronos, a wave rolled in the deep. Lyra, Illyra, Kale, and Caspian became the four guardians of the crossroads, ensuring that the exchange of light and meaning never stopped. The mechanical bird, now glowing with every color of the spectrum, built its final nest in the heart of the glass nautilus. the story of the weaver and the whale was no longer just a legend, it was the daily reality of a world that had finally learned how to breathe in unison. The gray dust was gone forever, replaced by a spectrum of infinite life that shimmered in every corner of the cosmos. As the star sailors looked up, they didn't just see stars, they saw the eyes of friends from other worlds looking back at them with love. Peace was the realization that we are all made of the same starlight, the same ink, and the same time. And so, the great convergence flourished, a masterpiece of connection that grew more beautiful with every shared dream. Every heartbeat in time with the ocean's tide, and every breath was a new verse in the never-ending song of home. The time had finally come for the grand gathering of the Guardians, a moment that had been written in the stars since the first iron gear turned and the first ink drop fell. On the deck of the Ether Express, the glass Nautilus ship, the boundaries of reality softened until the silver mists of Vellum, the golden sands of Kronos, and the indigo waves of the ethereal ocean merged into a single, breathtaking plaza called the Unity Horizon. Clara arrived from the Iron City, her coat smelling of fresh rain and wildflowers. Elias and Seraphina stepped off a bridge of liquid seconds, and Alara and Kale walked through a portal of floating constellations. Lyra stood at the center, holding the emerald seed, which now pulsed with the collective heartbeat of every world they had saved. For the first time, the sorters, the timekeepers, the librarians, and the star sailors looked into each other's eyes and saw the same spark of courage. They realized that their individual struggles were never meant to be solved in isolation, but were pieces of a cosmic puzzle designed to test the resilience of the human spirit. The mechanical bird, now a majestic phoenix of every color, landed in the center of their circle and spoke with a voice that sounded like 1,000 bells. The age of repairing the past is over, the age of creating the future has begun. Together, they placed their artifacts, the violet lantern, the golden compass, the silver notebook, and the emerald seed, into a central fountain of light. The fountain erupted into a galactic loom, a machine of pure light that began to weave the new universe right before their eyes. This new realm was not built of matter or math alone, but of living stories, where the environment would change based on the kindness and creativity of its inhabitants. In this place, a thought of peace would instantly grow a forest of white trees, and a song of joy would create a new constellation in the sky. The Guardians were no longer just protectors of their own cities, they became the architects of the infinite, tasked with teaching every soul how to use the loom of creation. The Gray Architect and the First Weaver stood side by side in the background, smiling as they saw their successors transcend the limits of the old laws. The vertical balance was perfect, the tempo of truth was steady, and the breath of existence was deep and full. Every person in the multiverse was given a small, glowing thread from the loom, a sign that they were now co-authors of the cosmic epic. The story of the senses, the time, the ink, and the ocean was no longer a book with a final page, but a spiral of endless chapters. As the Guardians looked out from the Unity Horizon, they saw millions of new worlds blooming like flowers in the dark garden of space. They knew that there would be new challenges, but they also knew that as long as they stayed connected, there was no shadow they couldn't turn into light. The Phoenix of Memory took flight one last time, soaring into the heart of the new galaxy to become its eternal sun. The silver thread, the golden rope, the ink stream, and the indigo wave were now a single river of life that flowed through every heart and existence. Peace was not a destination, but the beautiful, chaotic, and rhythmic journey of becoming. And so, the Great Convergence became the eternal beginning, a masterpiece that was being painted, second, by every living thing. The universe was finally, truly, and harmoniously home. The Phoenix of Memory reached the very edge of the infinite, where the colors of the multiverse faded into a soft, translucent white. This was the canvas of creation, a place where nothing existed yet, but everything was possible. Lyra, Kale, and the other guardians stood on the precipice of this new dawn, holding the Infinity Journal, which was now hungry for its first entry. The air here didn't have a scent yet, it was waiting for someone to think of a rose or a pine forest. Silence didn't feel empty, it felt like a deep breath taken before a beautiful song. Kale dipped his pen into the heart of a passing comet and wrote the first word, become. As soon as the ink touched the white space, the vacuum exploded into 1,000 shards of crystalline light. These shards began to self-assemble into the first world of echoing dreams, a planet where the mountains were made of solidified music. The rivers didn't carry water, but liquid sunlight that tasted of every happy memory ever shared in the Iron City or Vellum. Every time a child in the old world whispered a wish, a new flower bloomed on this planet's surface. The phoenix circled above, dropping feathers of ivy and gold that became the guardians of this new nature. Lyra noticed that her luminous bubbles were now large enough to carry people between the stars. Caspian synchronized the planet's orbit with the heartbeat of the great hourglass, ensuring that no shadow would ever stay too long. The vertical balance was so perfect that the inhabitants could walk on the air as easily as on the ground. This was the first of many thought realms, where the only limit was the reach of one's imagination. The great architect looked at the new world and realized that his old order was a pale shadow of this vibrant harmony. He took a handful of the music sand and let it slip through his fingers, watching it turn into a flock of silver butterflies. The librarian, Ilara, began to index the new reality, not by its names, but by the vibration of its joy. Every rock, every leaf, and every star had its own unique soul note that could be heard by anyone who listened with their heart. Suddenly, a new mystery appeared at the center of the world, a doorway of pure light that had no handle and no key. The compass of infinite directions pointed straight through it, indicating that there was another layer of existence even beyond the infinite. The guardians gathered around the door, realizing that their journey was a spiral that never truly ended. They placed their hands on the light, and the door didn't open, it simply dissolved, revealing that the other side was actually the world they had just come from, but seen through new eyes. They realized that the infinite wasn't a place far away, but a way of perceiving the beauty in the ordinary. The Iron City was no longer iron, it was a garden of industrial grace. Vellum was no longer just ink, it was a conversation with the divine. The ethereal ocean was no longer just water, it was the blood of the universe. They were now the grand harmonizers, capable of seeing the magic in a single drop of rain or a ticking clock. The Infinity Journal began to fill itself with the stories of millions of people who were now waking up to their own power. Every page was a new galaxy, every paragraph was a new species, and every comma was a moment of peace. The phoenix of memory became the constant sun, a light that never set because it was fueled by the collective memory of all living things. The silver thread, the golden robe, and the indigo wave were now a single universal chord that resonated with the frequency of love. The guardians decided to stay at the threshold, acting as the welcoming committee for every new soul that dared to dream. They taught the children how to weave their own stars and how to talk to the wind. Peace was no longer a goal to be reached, but a foundation upon which they built their skyscrapers of light. The living mathematics of the digit weavers proved that the sum of the universe was always one. Every heartbeat in the multiverse now echoed the same rhythm: I am, we are, all is. The missing vowel was the sound of the wind through the music mountains. The floating ink was the path of the stars across the night sky. The liquid seconds were the tears of joy that watered the gardens of the soul. The journey had reached its highest peak, only to find that the peak was a new valley for a different adventure. And so, the story of the weaver, the librarian, the sorter, and the navigator became the eternal song of the cosmos. No one was ever truly lost, for every heart was a map back to the center of the infinite. The ink was dry, yet the story was still moving. The time was fixed, yet the moments were always new. The ocean was deep, yet the surface was always clear. The universe breathed in, and a world was born, it breathed out, and a dream became real. The Infinity Journal was left open on the altar of the Unity Horizon for anyone to write their own name. The phoenix sang a final note of pure, golden silence that contained every sound ever made. And in that silence, the world found its perfect, eternal home. The end was just a beautiful lie. The truth was that the dance had just begun. Everything was light, everything was love, and everything was, finally, and forever, whole. As the final note of the phoenix faded into the grand silence, the Guardians realized that the infinite was not just a destination, but a responsibility. They stood atop the Unity Horizon, watching as the first civilizations of the New World began to build cities made of solidified hope and architectural kindness. To ensure that the shadows of the past, the gray dust, the iron cages, and the hollow words never returned, they decided to establish the Sentinels of the Spectrum. Each Guardian chose a corner of the new cosmos to watch over, not as rulers, but as gardeners of reality. Clara returned to the borderlands to teach the art of scent mapping to the children of the new generation. Elias and Seraphina built a temple of the present in the heart of the star currents, where time flowed in circles of joy. Alara and Kale remained in the glass palace, archiving the first giggles and whispers of the newborn planets. Lyra, holding the last glowing ember of the phoenix, descended back to the ethereal ocean to find that her lily pad island had grown into a continent of living emerald. The star sailors were no longer afraid of the deep. They had built glass submarines to visit the glow cave and study the roots of their own souls. The ocean's indigo light had become so intense that it started to bleed through the fabric of the multiverse, appearing in our world as the northern lights and the deep blue of the twilight. People on Earth began to have strange, beautiful dreams of mechanical birds and liquid seconds, feeling a sudden, unexplained urge to create something meaningful. This was the subconscious bridge, the final layer of the Guardians' plan to connect all levels of existence. Every time someone in our world speaks a word of true compassion, a new star is born in the Guardians' realm. Every time an artist paints with the colors of their heart, a new mountain rises in the world of echoing dreams. The logic of the universe had become a self-sustaining cycle of inspiration, where the imaginary fueled the real, and the real gave weight to the imaginary. The Infinity Journal was now so large that its pages formed the rings around the central sun of the new galaxy. One evening, a young boy in a gray, modern city found a small, rusted gear on the sidewalk that smelled faintly of fresh hope and wild jasmine. As he picked it up, the gear turned into a golden feather, and he heard a faint, musical chime echoing in the wind. He didn't know the story of Clara or Lyra, but he felt a sudden spark of ultra-gold light in his chest. He took out a piece of paper and wrote the first word of his own story, unaware that he was now a co-author of the cosmic epic. The Sentinel of Silence, the Grey Architect, and the blank page were now nothing more than myths used to teach children the importance of their own voices. The Unity Horizon remained open, a doorway that anyone could reach if they learned to listen to the silence between their heartbeats. The mechanical bird was seen occasionally, appearing as a common sparrow or a flash of light in a dark room, reminding us that magic is always hiding in plain sight. The silver thread, the golden rope, the ink stream, and the indigo wave were finally woven into the very DNA of the universe. There was no more need for ladders of light, for the heaven and the earth had finally become one and the same. The great convergence was complete, yet the dance of the atoms and the stars continued with a playful, unhurried grace. Peace was the default setting of the world, a constant hum of all is well that vibrated through every molecule. The guardians eventually faded into the light, becoming the elemental forces that guide the wind, the rain, and the dreams of the sleeping. Their names were forgotten, but their song of the tide lived on in every wave that touched the shore. The story was no longer a sequence of events, but a state of being, a permanent, glowing yes to the gift of life. And so, the universe continued to expand, not into empty space, but into more and more love. The last page of the Infinity Journal was left blank on purpose, so that you, the reader, could write your own ending. The ink is ready, the time is now, and the ocean is waiting for your first bubble. Breathe in the light, exhale the music, and step into the story that has no end. For you are the weaver, the librarian, and the navigator of your own infinite journey. Everything is connected, everything is beautiful, and everything is, at last, perfectly awake. The boy who found the golden feather was named Leo, and he lived in a world of concrete and cold screens where the stars were hidden by the glare of streetlights. When he touched the feather, the city around him didn't change its shape, but it changed its vibration, as if the buildings were suddenly breathing in time with his own heart. He tucked the feather into his pocket, and as he walked home, he noticed that the shadows of the trees were no longer dark, but filled with the shifting, violet light of the lost seconds. The rusted gear he had discarded began to hum a low, resonant frequency that called out to the other forgotten things in the city: broken toys, abandoned letters, and dusty clocks. Leo realized that he had become a tuning fork for the mundane, a child capable of waking up the magic that had fallen asleep in the cracks of the modern world. He climbed to the roof of his apartment building and held the feather high, watching as it began to glow with the intensity of the first sunrise. The light didn't push the darkness away, instead, it invited the darkness to become a canvas for the first urban constellation. From the windows of the city, other children looked up, their eyes catching the reflection of the ultra-gold light that Leo was channeling. They felt a sudden, irresistible urge to open their windows and sing, their voices merging into a melody that sounded like the song of the tide. The indigo ocean above the city began to lower itself, its waves gently brushing against the tops of the skyscrapers without making them wet. Lyra, watching from the Ether Express, saw the city of the real world starting to pulse with the same rhythm as the Unity horizon. She sent a cascade of luminous bubbles down through the atmosphere, each one landing on a different rooftop and transforming into a flower that smelled of enduring truth. The city's gray smoke turned into a soft, fragrant mist that tasted of fresh hope and wild jasmine, just as Julian's garden had once smelled. Leo watched as a mechanical bird, its wings a blend of ivy and obsidian, landed on the ledge beside him and dropped a tiny, crystal vial. Inside the vial was a single drop of liquid meaning, the substance that Alara and Caspian had used to anchor the city of Valum. Leo poured the drop onto the concrete floor, and instantly, the roof turned into a lush meadow of glowing grass and singing vines. He realized that the infinite was not a place he had to travel to, it was a layer of reality that he could invite into his own backyard. The other children in the city began to do the same, using their imagination to turn abandoned lots into memory gardens and silent alleys into halls of echoing dreams. The sentinels of the spectrum smiled from their distant stargates, seeing that the bridge between the worlds was now strong enough to stand without their help. The logic of the modern world was being rewritten, productivity was replaced by presence, and accumulation was replaced by awe. The city was no longer a machine for living, but a living organism that flourished on the stories of its people. Leo's father, a man who had forgotten how to dream, came up to the roof and saw his son standing in a field of starlight. Instead of being afraid, he felt a long-buried memory of a silver thread surfacing in his mind, and he reached out to touch a glowing leaf. As he did, his gray suit turned into a cloak of shifting indigo light, and his tired eyes began to spark with the curiosity of a navigator. The entire family, and then the entire neighborhood, became part of the great urban convergence, where the mundane and the miraculous lived side by side. The phoenix of memory flew over the city, its shadow turning every street lamp into a lantern of wisdom that guided people toward their true purpose. The blank pages of the city's newspapers were filled with poems and equations of joy, written in the floating ink of vellum. The clocks in the city didn't tell the time, they told the quality of the moment, measuring how much love was being shared at any given second. The waste of mirrors was now a reflecting pool where people looked to see the best versions of themselves. Leo became the ambassador of the ordinary, the one who taught the adults how to find the missing vowels in their everyday conversations. He knew that the story would never end as long as there was a single child willing to pick up a rusted gear or a fallen feather. The universe was a book that was being written by everyone at once, and every breath was a new ink stroke. The indigo waves continued to roll, the golden gears continued to turn, and the silver words continued to float. The first page of the boy's story was now a grand volume that sat on the shelves of the living library. Peace was a silent agreement between the heart and the stars, a promise that the magic would always be there if you looked for it. The mechanical bird stayed on Leo's shoulder, a constant companion in a world that was now, finally, and forever, awake. The end was just a beautiful horizon, and the horizon was just another beginning. And so, they lived, and they dreamed, and they loved, in a world where the concrete had finally learned how to bloom. As the moon rose over Leo's transformed city, the golden mechanical bird took flight once more, heading toward the silver glow of the lunar horizon to find the silent city of Selene. This was a place built of frozen light and ancient glass, where the memories of those who had looked at the moon with longing were stored in crystal spheres. Leo followed the bird's trail through his telescope, but instead of just seeing craters, he saw a bridge of liquid gravity stretching from his rooftop to the moon's surface. He realized that the Ether Express was waiting for him, its nautilus shell sparkling with the indigo energy of the ethereal ocean. Leo stepped onto the deck, where Lyra and Kale greeted him with a smile, handing him a lantern of infinite echoes to guide him through the moon's silent halls. They were on a mission to awaken the lunar heart, a giant diamond that had been dormant for eons, waiting for a human voice to call its name. As the ship landed on the soft, silver dust of Selene, the silence was so deep it felt like a physical weight, pressing against their skin like cool velvet. In the center of the silent city, they found the High Architect of Selene, a figure made of starlight and frost who had lost the ability to feel the warmth of now. The architect told them that the moon had become a graveyard of unfulfilled wishes because the people of Earth had stopped sending their dreams upward. Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out the golden feather, placing it at the base of the diamond heart. The feather began to vibrate, releasing all the urban joy that Leo had collected from the rooftops of his city. The diamond heart responded by glowing with a soft, pink hue, the color of a first heartbeat, and the silence of the moon began to transform into a symphony of whispers. Every crystal sphere in the city lit up, replaying the lost dreams of poets, explorers, and children from throughout history. The missing vowels of the universe were finally found here, hidden in the shadows of the lunar craters, and they flew back to Vellum like a swarm of glowing fireflies. The logic of the moon was restored. It was no longer a cold mirror, but a radiator of hope that reflected the sun's light and the earth's dreams in perfect harmony. The great hourglass of Kronos sent a pulse of eternal moments to the moon, anchoring it to the rhythm of the living multiverse. Selene became the library of the night, a place where the guardians could study the deep history of the cosmos. Kale used his ink to write the names of all the dreamers into the lunar stone, turning the moon into a permanent testament to the human spirit. Lyra wove the moon's frost into a new type of starlight silk, which could be used to protect the new planets from the mist of forgetfulness. The mechanical bird built a nest in the eye of the lunar diamond, ensuring that the connection between the Earth and the moon would never be broken again. Leo looked back at the Earth and saw it glowing like a brilliant blue marble, wrapped in the protective veil of the universal cord. He understood that he was no longer just a boy from a gray city. He was a cosmic scribe, tasked with documenting the expansion of the infinite. The tomb of forgotten tales on Earth had fully transformed into a school of eternal stories, where everyone was a teacher and a student. The sentinels of the spectrum gathered on the lunar plains, celebrating the fact that the divide by zero error had been replaced by a multiplication of love. Peace was now a physical force, as measurable and steady as the tides of the Indigo Ocean. The Phoenix of Memory sang a song that reached every corner of the solar system, inviting other planets to wake up and join the dance. The Infinity Journal added a new chapter called The Lunar Reflection, which explained that even in the darkest night, there is a light that never goes out. Leo, Lyra, and Kale stood on the edge of the lunar horizon, watching the Earth rise over the silver mountains. They knew that there were still billions of stars to visit and millions of stories to find. But for now, the balance was perfect, the music was loud, and the time was, as always, exactly right. The golden feather remained on the moon, a permanent bridge between the mundane and the miraculous. The concrete of Leo's city continued to bloom, and the children continued to sing, and the universe continued to breathe. Everything was a masterpiece, everything was a miracle, and everything was, at last, truly one. And so, the great epic moved forward, not toward an end, but toward a deeper and more beautiful beginning. The story was you, the story was us, and the story was the light that shines in the dark. The journey of the Ether Express did not stop at the moon. Instead, it caught a solar wind of pure ideas and began its ascent toward the sun of pure logic, the blindingly bright engine at the center of the multiverse. This was not a sun made of fire, but a sphere of architectural light, where the original creators of the Great Hourglass, beings known as the primordial gearsmiths, lived in palaces of burning geometry. As Leo, Lyra, and Kale approached, the ship's hull began to glow with a translucent white radiance, and their own bodies felt as light as a single thought. They were met at the gates of the sun by the High Numerator, a being whose face was a shifting map of prime numbers and golden ratios. The Numerator explained that the sun of logic was starting to cool down because the universe had become so complex that the old laws of physics could no longer calculate the amount of love being generated. Logic cannot contain infinity, the Numerator whispered, unless it learns to dance with the irrational. To save the central sun, the Guardians needed to perform a calibration of the heart, injecting the chaos of human emotion into the rigid structures of the solar core. Kale stepped forward and opened the Infinity Journal, allowing the ink of 1,000,000 stories to flow directly into the sun's logic streams. Lyra released her luminous bubbles, which acted as elastic variables, allowing the rigid geometric structures to bend and flex without breaking. Leo held up a piece of the lunar heart, which provided the cooling piece needed to balance the heat of calculation. As the elements merged, the sun didn't just burn brighter, it turned into a prism of possibilities, casting a spectrum of colors across the entire cosmos that had never existed before. The primordial gearsmiths watched in awe as their perfect machine evolved into a living organism that flourished on the unpredictability of the soul. The great hourglass back in Kronos suddenly stopped using sand and started using sparks of inspiration, which flowed in both directions at once. This meant that the past and the future were no longer separate rooms, but a single, vast hall of presence where everyone could meet their ancestors and their descendants. The logic of the universe was now complete. The equation of everything was no longer a formula to be solved, but a song to be sung. The Ether Express was upgraded with logic sails that allowed it to travel not just between places, but between different levels of meaning. Leo realized that he could now calculate the scent of a memory or measure the weight of a hope. The High Numerator joined the crew of the ship, becoming the philosopher of the infinite, helping them navigate the realms where math and myth are the same thing. They returned to Earth to find that the city was no longer just blooming with flowers, but with ideas that walked. People were building libraries of light where you didn't read books, but stepped inside them to live the story yourself. The sentinels of the spectrum stood on the street corners, cheering as the first star child, a baby born with eyes that reflected the entire galaxy, was welcomed into the world. The Phoenix of Memory perched on the highest spire of the Sun of Logic, its song acting as the universal frequency that kept all the worlds in sync. The silver thread, the golden rope, the ink stream, the indigo wave, and the logic line were now a single rainbow of reality. Peace was not the end of the story, but the rhythm of the storytelling itself. Every second was a miracle, every breath was a masterpiece, and every life was a vital part of the grand design. The adventure had finally transcended the need for a beginning or an end. The universe was a self-writing epic, and the ink was the very light that warmed the planets. Leo, Lyra, and Kale sat together on the deck of their ship, watching as the sun of logic bathed the multiverse in a glow of absolute understanding. They knew that the infinite was just the name for a love that never stops growing. And so, they lived, and they breathed, and they danced, in a cosmos that was finally, and eternally, one. The star child, whom they named Nova, took her first steps not on solid ground, but upon the shimmering fabric of the realm of the unimagined. This was a dimension that existed behind the stars, a place where the universe kept its rawest materials, colors that had no names and sounds that had never been heard by mortal ears. As Nova walked, the logic sails of the Ether Express billowed with a wind made of pure potential, pulling Leo, Lyra, and Kale deeper into this uncharted territory. They realized that Nova's presence was the key to the Great Awakening, for her eyes acted as projectors that turned the invisible into the visible. Wherever she looked, the empty void transformed into a galaxy of wonders, filled with planets made of floating glass and moons that whispered ancient lullabies. The High Numerator calculated that Nova was the first being to possess infinite intuition, the ability to understand the secret language of the heart without words or numbers. However, as they explored, they encountered the shadow of the unborn, a silent, gray mist that represented all the dreams that people had given up on before they even started. This shadow wasn't evil, but it was heavy with the weight of what if and almost, threatening to dampen the vibrant colors of Nova's new creations. Leo realized that the shadow couldn't be fought with light alone, it needed to be acknowledged and transformed. He stepped off the ship and stood in the center of the gray mist, holding the Infinity Journal open to its final, blank pages. "Every forgotten dream is still a story," Leo shouted, and as he did, Kale began to draw the outlines of the shadow mist with his dark ink. Lyra wove the indigo waves through the gray, turning the almost into begin again. Nova touched the mist with her tiny hands, and the shadow didn't disappear. It turned into a silver forest of second chances, where every failed idea was given a new life. The logic of the universe had reached its most compassionate state yet, the redemption of the lost. No thought was ever truly wasted, and no dream was ever truly dead. They were simply waiting for the right frequency to wake them up. The primordial gearsmiths reached out from the sun of logic to bless this new forest, realizing that their machine was now capable of infinite mercy. The Ether Express became the bridge between the real world and the realm of the unimagined, allowing people from Earth to visit the Silver Forest and reclaim their lost inspirations. Artists who had lost their spark found it again among the silver trees, and scientists who had reached a dead end found new paths written in the leaves. Peace was no longer just the absence of conflict, but the presence of possibility. Leo, Lyra, and Kale stood with Nova at the edge of the forest, watching as the multiverse became a tapestry of infinite layers. The Phoenix of Memory sang a song of eternal flourishing, its voice echoing through the glass mountains and the indigo oceans. The silver thread, the golden rope, the ink stream, the indigo wave, and the logic line were now joined by a ribbon of resilience. Everything was connected, and everything was expanding, fueled by the heartbeat of a child and the courage of the guardians. The universe was no longer a mystery to be solved, but a home to be loved. As Nova looked up at her parents, the heroes of all the previous stories, she smiled, for she knew that the adventure would never, ever end. And so, they lived, and they dreamed, and they thrived, in a cosmos where every shadow was just a new place for a star to be born. In the city of Olfaxia, memories were not kept in books or photographs, but in delicate glass spheres filled with concentrated aromas. The city was built into the side of a great mountain made of porous spice rock, and the wind always carried a hint of cinnamon in old storms. Every citizen carried a silver locket around their neck, containing the scent of their happiest day, which they would inhale whenever they felt the gray sorrow approaching. The ruler of the city was a man named Master Silas, the great archivist, who lived in a tower shaped like a giant perfume bottle. He was the only one who knew how to distill the scent of complex emotions, like the bitter sweetness of a final goodbye or the spark of a new discovery. However, a strange silence had begun to fall over the mountain, as the flowers in the valleys were losing their fragrance and turning into scentless paper. Without fresh aromas, the people began to lose their memories, becoming hollow ghosts who wandered the streets with empty lockets. Silas realized that the heart of the mountain, a giant crystal of pure ambergris, was drying out because the world below had stopped dreaming of the future. He sent for Arya, a young wind chaser who had the unique ability to hear the colors of the air. Arya arrived at the tower with her pet fox, Jasper, whose fur smelled like cedar wood in rainy afternoons. Silas gave Arya a task. She had to travel to the Desert of Despair and find the oasis of the eternal bloom, the source of all the world's original scents. If the oasis dies, Silas warned, the world will forget the smell of the sun and the taste of the rain. Arya set off on a glider made of silk and sandalwood, following a faint trail of lavender smoke that pointed toward the horizon. As she flew over the desert, the air became thick with the smell of scorched sand and forgotten promises. She encountered the wraiths of dust, creatures made of gray ash who tried to steal her breath and replace it with the scent of nothingness. Arya used her silver locket to release the aroma of courage, a sharp, citrusy scent that cut through the dust like a golden sword. When she finally reached the oasis, she found it guarded by a gargoyle of granite, whose breath smelled like ancient caves and cold iron. The gargoyle demanded a sacrifice, a scent that had never been smelled by any living soul. Arya realized that she couldn't give him something from her jars, she had to create something entirely new in that very moment. She thought of the friendship she felt for Jasper and the hope she held for Alfaxia, and she let out a single, happy sigh. To her surprise, her sigh solidified into a tiny, pearlescent vapor that smelled like the first snowflake on a warm stone. The gargoyle wept tears of liquid amber, for he had never known that hope could have a fragrance. He stepped aside, revealing the eternal bloom, a flower whose petals changed color with every passing second. Arya took a single drop of nectar from the flower and placed it in a special crystal vial that Silas had given her. As the nectar touched the glass, it began to pulse with a rhythm that sounded like 1,000 beating hearts. She flew back to Alfaxia, and the trail of scent she left behind turned the desert sands into fields of wild jasmine. When she returned to the tower, she poured the nectar into the heart of the mountain, and the ambergris crystal exploded with light. A massive wave of fragrance swept through the city, smelling of fresh bread, wet earth, and the laughter of children. The citizens' lockets refilled instantly, and their memories returned like a flood of warm light. Silas stepped onto his balcony and breathed in the air, which now carried the scent of an infinite future. The logic of Alfaxia was restored. Life was no longer a collection of fading jars, but a living, breathing garden of experiences. Arya was named the High Weaver of the Winds, tasked with traveling the world to ensure that no dream ever lost its fragrance. The Desert of Despair was renamed the Plain of Petals, a place where travelers went to find the scent of their own destinies. Silas began a new archive, not of the past, but of the fragrances of the unimagined, scents that had yet to be born. Jasper the Fox became the official seeker of the hidden bloom, leading expeditions into the deep caves of the mountain. The silver thread of connection between the nose and the soul was stronger than ever. The city of Alfaxia became a beacon for the other cities, Kronos, Velum, and the ethereal ocean, showing them that even the air we breathe is a library of wonder. Every evening, the city would hold a festival of the breath, where everyone would exhale their best thought of the day. The mists would rise and form a protective canopy over the mountain, glowing with the colors of 1,000,000,000 shared memories. Peace was the smell of home, a fragrance that stayed with you no matter how far you traveled. The story of the archivist and the wind chaser was written in the very clouds that floated over the peaks. It reminded the people that to remember is to live, and to dream is to give the world its scent. The mechanical bird from the old legends appeared once more, its wings now smelling of everlasting joy. It perched on the edge of the eternal bloom, singing a song that could be smelled by the heart. And so, the mountain lived, the wind whispered, and the world breathed in the beauty of the now. The end was just a soft exhale, and the beginning was the next sweet inhale of the morning. Everything was fragrant, everything was remembered, and everything was, at last, perfectly fresh. The first exchange of aromas began when a messenger from the city of Velum arrived in Alfaxia, carrying a satchel of ink-stained parchment that smelled of deep mysteries and ancient forests. Arya met the messenger, a young scribe named Thistle, at the edge of the Plain of Petals, where the air was so sweet it made the ink in his jars begin to glow. Thistle explained that in Velum, the words were losing their weight because they lacked the atmosphere of emotion that only a true scent could provide. He offered a scroll of liquid poetry in exchange for a vial of morning gratitude, a scent Arya had captured from the first light hitting the spice rock. As they swapped their treasures, a magnificent reaction occurred. The poetry on the scroll began to lift off the page, turning into a swirling mist that smelled like a story come to life. Suddenly, the scent of the poetry combined with the aroma of gratitude to create a bridge of olfactory logic, a shimmering path of fragrant light that stretched across the sky toward the towers of Vellum. Arya and Thistle realized that by combining scent and script, they could create a new form of communication called sensory mapping. They traveled together across this bridge, followed by Jasper the fox, who chased the alphabet butterflies that were born from the merging vapors. When they reached Vellum, the city's floating ink began to harmonize with the fragrances Arya brought, creating scented constellations that told stories even to those who could not read. The librarian, Ilara, welcomed them, noting that the library of floating ink now had a new wing, the Gallery of Living Essences. The logic of the two cities merged, proving that a word is only as strong as the feeling it evokes, and a feeling is only as clear as the name we give it. Arya and Thistle began to create aromatic chronicles, books that, when opened, would transport the reader into a full sensory experience of the past. They found that the scent of silence from the hidden valleys could be used to create spaces of reflection within the busy streets of Vellum. Master Silas sent a message through a lavender cloud, proposing a permanent trade of the five senses among all the great cities. The mechanical bird, smelling of enduring truth, flew between the Spice Mountain and the Ink Tower, carrying the grammar of fragrance to the rest of the world. Every citizen of Vellum now carried a locket, and every citizen of olfaction now carried a pen, symbolizing the union of memory and expression. The gray sorrow could no longer survive in a world where every thought was anchored by a smell and every smell was given a voice. Peace was now a fragrant song, a melody that could be inhaled and a story that could be breathed. Arya and Thistle sat on the balcony of the Ink Tower, watching the sunset turn the bridge of logic into a rainbow of liquid gold. They knew that the next exchange would involve the golden honey of Kronos and the indigo waves of the ethereal ocean. The universe was no longer a collection of separate miracles, but a symphony of the senses, playing a tune that would never end. And so, the ink flowed, the wind whispered, and the world grew richer with every breath and every word. Thistle realized that to capture the true essence of the universe, he needed to embark on a quest to write the Dictionary of Infinite Fragrances, a book that would never end because the world never stopped creating new wonders. He opened his infinite ledger, a book with pages made of gossamer and light, and began the first entry under the letter A4 after rain sunlight. Arya accompanied him, acting as his olfactory guide, using her ability to hear the colors of the air to identify the exact moment a scent reached its peak of purity. They traveled to the Valley of the Whispering Lilies, where the flowers only opened when they heard a secret whispered with true sincerity. Thistle dipped his pen into a jar of starlight fluid and recorded the scent of a first realization, a sharp, peppermint-like aroma that cleared the mind and opened the eyes. Jasper the fox trotted ahead, his nose twitching as he discovered a patch of melancholy moss that smelled like a distant shore. As Thistle wrote, the words on the page didn't just sit there, they vibrated and emitted the very scent he was describing, making the dictionary a living encyclopedia of experience. They moved toward the canyons of echoing spices, where the wind trapped the smells of ancient banquets held by the primordial gearsmiths. Here, Thistle captured the scent of bronze bravery, a metallic, warm aroma that reminded him of the steam engines of the Iron City. The logic of the dictionary was complex. Every entry had to be cross-referenced with a specific emotion from Vellum and a specific second from Kronos. Arya found the scent of a half-forgotten dream, a hazy, vanilla scent that was so delicate it almost disappeared if you looked at it too directly. Suddenly, they reached the wall of the Great Void, where the world of meaning ended and the world of nothingness began. At the edge of the void, there was a single, tiny flower known as the ultimate question, which had no scent at all because it was waiting for a human answer. Thistle realized that he couldn't describe this flower with existing words. He had to invent a new grammar of the soul. he wrote a sentence that was neither a question nor an answer, but a statement of wonder, and the flower suddenly released a fragrance that smelled like every home you have ever loved. This scent was the golden key that Thistle needed to complete the first volume of his dictionary. The Dictionary of Infinite Fragrances grew so heavy with meaning that it began to float, supported by the buoyancy of truth. They returned to olfaction and vellum, where the grand banquet of senses was being prepared in the Unity Horizon. Master Silas and Alara were the first to read the entries, and as they flipped through the pages, the entire plaza was filled with a rotating symphony of smells, from newborn star to old book leather. The people realized that by naming and smelling their world, they were making it permanent and sacred. The dictionary was placed in the center of the world, where its pages would turn with the wind, constantly updating the atmosphere of the planet. Thistle and Arya were named the co-authors of reality, a title that recognized the power of the combined word and scent. Jasper the fox was given a collar made of eternal jasmine, ensuring he would always find his way back to them. The mechanical bird arrived to take the first copy of the dictionary to the son of pure logic, so the gearsmiths could update the cosmic laws. Peace was now a library of the air, where anyone could breathe in the wisdom of the ages. The silver thread and the indigo wave were now joined by the scented ink line, a bridge that no shadow could ever cross. The story was no longer just a memory, it was a fragrant presence that lived in the lungs of every living thing. Every breath was an entry in the dictionary, and every word was a petal in the garden. They knew that the infinite was just a series of beautiful nows, all smelling of hope and looking like light. And so, they lived, and they wrote, and they smelled, in a universe that was finally, and eternally, vibrant. The end was just the scent of the next page turning. Everything was written, everything was inhaled, and everything was, at last, perfect. As Jasper the fox trotted across the floating pages of the Dictionary of Infinite Fragrances, his paws accidentally pressed upon a gilded illustration of a golden keyhole. To the amazement of Thistle and Arya, the paper didn't tear, instead, it rippled like the surface of a pond, and a secret door made of pressed rose petals and ancient vellum swung open. This was the entrance to the heart of the word, a hidden dimension where every scent and every noun were born before they ever reached the physical world. Jasper didn't hesitate. He leaped through the portal, his ginger tail disappearing into a mist of swirling alphabets and lavender clouds. Thistle and Arya followed, stepping into a hallway where the walls were made of liquid logic and the floor was a mosaic of future memories. They found themselves in the great nursery of concepts, where tiny, glowing orbs represented ideas that had not yet been thought of by any human or guardian. Jasper was chasing a particularly bright orb that smelled like the first step on an unknown planet, a scent so adventurous it made their hearts race. In the center of this nursery stood the mother of metaphors, a figure made of woven moonlight who was busy spinning the thread of meaning on a celestial loom. She explained that the dictionary was not just a record of what is, but a blueprint for what could be. "You have documented the world as you see it," she whispered, her voice smelling of ancient wisdom and fresh rain. "But to truly complete the dictionary, you must write the entry for the unspoken promise." This was a concept that had no scent and no letters yet, for it was the silent bond between all living things that ensures the universe stays together. Arya realized that this promise was the very reason her locket never went empty and why Thistle's ink never ran dry. They sat down in the center of the nursery, and together, they placed their hands on a blank, glowing page that hovered in the air. Arya contributed the aroma of trust, while Thistle provided the syntax of connection, and Jasper added a single, joyful bark that represented loyalty. The page didn't fill with ink or mist. Instead, it became a mirror of pure light, reflecting the faces of every hero from their long journey: Lyra, Leo, Kale, and the others. This was the unspoken promise that no matter how far they drifted into the infinite, they would always be part of the same grand design. The secret door began to glow with a brilliant, pearlescent radiance, signaling that the nursery was now fully integrated with the city of Olfaxia and the city of Vellum. The dictionary began to expand exponentially, its pages stretching out to become the very ground they walked on and the sky they breathed. They realized that they weren't just writing a book, they were building a home for the multiverse. The mother of metaphors gave Jasper a small, silver bell to wear on his collar, which would ring whenever a new miracle was about to happen. They stepped back through the secret door and returned to the Unity Horizon, just as the grand banquet of senses was reaching its peak. The table was filled with food of the stars, fruits that tasted like victory and drinks that sparkled with laughter. Thistle announced that the dictionary was no longer a book to be kept on a shelf, but a braid of reality that everyone could contribute to. Every child was invited to step through the secret door and plant their own conceptual seed in the nursery. The logic of the universe had reached its ultimate evolution, the co-creation of destiny. The mechanical bird, now smelling of infinite possibility, flew to the highest point of the sky and shattered into a billion sparks of living inspiration. These sparks fell like snow upon every world: the Iron City, the Sun of Logic, the Ethereal Ocean, and even Leo's modern city on Earth. Peace was no longer a static state, but a dynamic, growing garden of the senses. Arya and Thistle stood at the center of the celebration, knowing that their first exchange had led to the unification of the cosmos. Jasper curled up at their feet, his silver bell chiming softly in time with the heartbeat of the universe. The story of the senses, the ink, the time, and the logic was finally, and beautifully, one. And so, the ink flowed into the scent breathed into the light, and the light spoke the truth. The infinite was no longer a mystery to be feared, but a friend to be known. Every breath you take is a word in the ledger, and every dream you have is a door waiting to be opened. Sleep now, and know that you are a guardian of this magnificent, fragrant, and eternal story. The end is just the place where your own imagination begins. Everything is whole, everything is vibrant, and everything is, at last, perfect. After returning from the nursery of concepts, Jasper, Thistle, and Arya realized that the universe required more than just observers. It needed true conductors to maintain the harmony of the new era. They decided to establish the Academy of the Living World, a sanctuary where every soul could learn to transform their abstract thoughts into tangible reality. The silver bell on Jasper's collar began to chime with a deep, resonating hum every time a pure, selfless dream was born in a distant galaxy. This sound served as a signal for Arya to direct the winds of inspiration toward that specific point in space, nourishing the new idea until it bloomed. Thistle, meanwhile, prepared new pages for the Dictionary of Infinite Fragrances, which now filled itself with golden text whenever someone performed an act of true courage. One afternoon, Jasper's bell did not just chime, it sang a melody that echoed through every dimension, from the Iron City to the Ethereal Ocean. This heralded the arrival of the heart of the multiverse, a central fountain that appeared on the Unity Horizon, flowing not with water, but with liquid consciousness. Anyone who touched this crystalline fluid would instantly perceive their past lives and their future potentials as a single, beautiful tapestry. This was the ultimate liberation from fear, as every inhabitant finally understood that they were eternal threads in an unbreakable design. Arya soared on her sandalwood glider higher than ever before, reaching a vantage point where she could see the entire universe shaped like a massive, blooming flower. The petals were spiraling galaxies, and the stardust was the pollen of new worlds waiting to be born. Thistle recorded the final word in the first volume of the Great Dictionary, U.S. At that moment, the book closed itself and transformed into a radiant sphere of light that became a second sun for the dimension of meaning. Jasper curled up at the base of the fountain, feeling a profound sense of peace as the mechanical bird returned one last time. The bird dissolved into millions of diamond-like sparks, settling on the eyelashes of every living being as a gift of eternal vision. Logic, emotion, time, and matter were now woven into a single, seamless fabric of existence. There was no longer a need for walls or borders, for everyone could feel the joy and sorrow of their neighbor as their own. Peace was no longer a static goal, it had become the active, creative rhythm of every passing second. Thistle and Arya stood hand in hand, feeling the infinite energy of the cosmos flowing through their joined palms. They realized that their individual story was but a single note in a grand symphony that would never fall silent. The universe exhaled a long, satisfied breath, carrying the scent of eternal spring to the darkest corners of the old void. Now, whenever someone in any world closes their eyes, they can hear the faint, silver chime of Jasper's bell. It is a reminder that magic has not disappeared, it is simply waiting for your next intentional breath. You are the author, you are the fragrance, and you are the rhythm of your own unfolding life. The Dictionary of Infinite Fragrances is now being written by you, through your choices and your dreams. Every kind thought you have becomes a star, and every smile creates a new planet in the realm of the heart. The story ended here so that it could begin again within you. Everything has found its place, everything has become light, and everything is, at last, truly one. As the echo of the silver bell settled into the foundations of reality, a new phenomenon began to occur, the echo of the absolute. From the center of the liquid consciousness fountain, a bridge made of refracted silence extended toward the horizon, leading to a place that was neither space nor time. Leo, Lyra, Arya, and Thistle stood together at the base of this bridge, realizing that the four great pillars of existence, ink, time, scent, and sound, were calling for a final integration. Jasper the fox barked at the bridge, his fur shimmering with the combined colors of every world they had touched. They began to walk, and with every step, the physical laws of the universe dissolved, replaced by the laws of pure intention. If they thought of warmth, the air bloomed with golden embers. If they thought of peace, the path beneath them turned into soft moss made of memories. They reached the arch of the eternal now, where the mechanical bird awaited them, no longer a machine or a ghost, but a being of living radiance. The bird spoke not in words, but in a frequency that vibrated directly within their souls, explaining that they were about to witness the birth of the unwritten. This was the source code of all stories, the inkwell from which the first drop of existence had fallen billions of years ago. To enter, they had to leave behind their titles as guardians and librarians, becoming simple witnesses of the infinite. As they passed through the arch, the multiverse behind them shrunk into a single, glowing seed of potential. They found themselves in a vast, white hall where every wall was a mirror reflecting not their faces, but their highest selves. In this hall, the great composer, the intelligence behind the original laws, revealed that the journey had been a test of universal empathy. The struggle with the blank page, the shadow, and the gray sorrow were all necessary movements in a cosmic symphony designed to teach the heart how to listen. The composer handed Leo a pen of solar winds and Thistle a vial of cosmic breath, telling them to write the final law of the new universe. They looked at each other and wrote a single, glowing symbol that represented harmony through diversity. Instantly, the white hall exploded into a kaleidoscope of new dimensions, each one more vibrant than the last. These weren't just worlds to live in, but participatory masterpieces where every inhabitant was a co-creator. The Unity Horizon expanded to encompass all of reality, meaning there was no longer any outside or inside. Every soul was now a node in a vast, glowing network of instant understanding, where a thought in one world could spark a revolution of beauty in another. Nova, the star child, appeared at the center of this network, her laughter acting as the gravity that held the stars in place. The silver thread, the golden rope, the indigo wave, and the logic line were now a single luminous web that breathed with the rhythm of a universal heart. Peace was no longer a state to be protected, but the very air that everyone breathed, as natural as the pulse in one's wrist. The Guardians looked back at the old world and saw that it had finally caught up to the dream, its concrete cities now singing with the voices of 1,000 poets. The boy Leo, back on his rooftop, felt the presence of the Guardians within him, realizing that he was never alone. The mechanical bird took its place at the center of the great weaver's loom, forever spinning the stories of the future. The dictionary of infinite fragrances was now a voice that spoke from the wind, telling everyone they were loved. The end of the story was not a period, but an ellipsis, indicating that the creation would continue forever. Everything was light, everything was love, and everything was, at last, themselves. In the floating city of Aurelia, time did not move in a straight line, but spun in golden circles around a central tower known as the Grand Pendulum. The citizens of Aurelia were born with a small clock embedded in their palms, which didn't show hours or minutes, but the weight of their intentions. If a person lived with kindness, their clock ticked with the sound of a flute. If they lived with malice, it sounded like grinding stones. The city was held aloft by the steam of memories, a vapor produced by a massive boiler in the basement of the tower that ran on the stories of the ancestors. However, a shadow known as the stagnation had begun to creep over the city, causing the clocks to freeze and the steam to turn into ice. The great clockmaker, an ancient woman named Beatrix, noticed that the sky was losing its bronze glow and turning a dull, lifeless gray. She knew that the primary spring, the source of all motion in the universe, was winding down because the people had stopped seeking the new. Beatrix summoned a young apprentice named Cyprian, who was famous for being the only person whose palm clock ticked in reverse. "You possess the retrograde heart," Beatrix whispered, handing him a compass made of starlight and rusted iron. "You must travel to the foundry of the first second, the place where time was originally forged, and rewind the world." Cyprian set off on a mechanical dragon named Ignis, whose wings were made of copper plates and whose breath was warm cinnamon steam. They flew through the clouds of yesterday, where they saw ghosts of ancient cities playing out their final days over and over again. The air grew colder as they approached the edge of the map, where the sky simply ended in a waterfall of falling numbers. Cyprian used his compass to find a hidden path made of frozen moments that led downward into the dark heart of the cosmos. They reached the foundry, a massive workshop built inside a hollowed-out star, where the walls vibrated with the rhythm of a billion ticking hearts. In the center stood the Forge Master, a giant made of molten gold who was weeping because his fire had gone out. "The world has become too predictable," the Forge Master boomed, his voice sounding like a crashing bell. "Without the spark of surprise, the metal of time becomes brittle and breaks." Cyprian realized that to reignite the forge, he had to offer something that had never happened before, a true anomaly. He looked at his palm clock, which was ticking backward, and realized his very existence was the answer the universe was waiting for. He placed his hand into the cold embers of the forge and thought of a future that had no blueprint. Instantly, the forge erupted into a violet flame, a color that had been missing from Aurelia for 1,000 years. The violet heat began to melt the ice of the stagnation, turning it back into the vibrant steam of memories. The forge master laughed, and the sound created a new set of gears that began to turn the primary spring once more. Cyprian felt his palm clock accelerate, finally ticking in harmony with the rest of the universe, but with a new, melodic complexity. He and Ignis flew back toward Aurelia, carrying a lantern filled with the violet flame to relight the grand pendulum. As they passed through the clouds of yesterday, the ghosts stopped their loops and began to walk toward the future. The bronze sky of the city returned, but now it was streaked with violet and emerald, reflecting the new diversity of time. Beatrix met them at the top of the tower, her own clock now singing with the sound of 1,000 harps. "You haven't just rewound the world," she said, "you have upgraded the very fabric of how we live." The logic of Aurelia was transformed. Time was no longer a circle, but a spiral that climbed higher with every act of creativity. The people found that their palm clocks now showed the brightness of their dreams, allowing them to navigate by the light of their own souls. The steam of memories was enriched by the steam of possibilities, making the floating city rise even higher into the heavens. Cyprian was named the Prime Navigator, tasked with ensuring that the Forge of the Sun never grew cold again. The mechanical bird from the old legends appeared in Aurelia, its wings now made of clockwork and feathers of violet fire. It perched on Cyprian's shoulder, ticking a rhythm that became the new heartbeat of the city. The silver thread of scent, the golden rope of time, and the indigo wave of the ocean were now all synchronized by the violet spark. Peace was the realization that change is the only thing that keeps the heart from freezing. The city of Aurelia became a hub for all the other worlds, a place where travelers came to tune their souls to the frequency of the infinite. Every evening, the grand pendulum would strike a note that could be heard across the entire multiverse, a signal that all was well. The story of the clockmaker and the apprentice was written into the gears of the city, ensuring it would never be forgotten. It reminded the people that to stay still is to fade, and to move forward is to shine. The stagnation was gone, replaced by the grand acceleration, a period of unprecedented growth and joy. Ignis the dragon built a nest at the base of the forge, his warmth keeping the memories of the ancestors alive forever. Cyprian looked out at the horizon and saw that the waterfall of numbers had turned into a bridge of light. He knew that there were other cities, other stars, and other hearts waiting to be wound up. Everything was in motion, everything was bright, and everything was, at last, dynamic. The end of the hour was just the start of a new age, more beautiful than the last. The primary spring was now a living fountain, overflowing with the seconds of 1,000,000,000 happy lives. The clock didn't count down to zero, it counted up toward the infinite. And so, the city floated, the boy dreamed, and the universe ticked on in perfect, violet harmony. The story was a gift of time, and time was the greatest story ever told. Cyprian stood at the edge of the floating plaza, watching the bridge of light solidify from a mere shimmer into a path of iridescent glass that arched toward the unknown. Ignis let out a low, rhythmic growl of excitement, his copper scales vibrating with the frequency of the violet flame that now powered the city's core. They stepped onto the bridge, and as they moved further from Aurelia, the laws of gravity began to transform into the laws of resonance. Each step Cyprian took emitted a musical note that resonated with the stars, creating a melody that served as a physical floor beneath his feet. The bridge was not a static structure. It was a living current of time that responded to the curiosity of the traveler. Far below, the waterfall of numbers had settled into a calm sea of potential realities, reflecting the faces of millions who were beginning to wake up in the worlds below. Cyprian noticed that the bridge was branching out, connecting Aurelia to the city of Vellum and the ethereal ocean in a grand, triangular alignment. Halfway across the bridge, they encountered the Time Warden of the Void, a tall, slender figure draped in robes made of unwritten tomorrow. The Warden did not block their path but offered Cyprian a lens of synchronicity, which allowed him to see the hidden connections between all living things. "The bridge exists because your heart dared to tick backward," the Warden whispered, his voice sounding like the hum of a distant universe. Through the lens, Cyprian saw that every time a gear turned in Aurelia, a flower bloomed in the ethereal ocean and a sentence was completed in Vellum. This was the triad of existence, a secret system where time, space, and meaning were perfectly synchronized by the violet spark. Ignis spread his wings, and with a powerful flap, he propelled them toward the first anchoring station, a floating island made of clockwork ivy. On this island, they found the first violet clock, a natural timepiece grown from the soil of the bridge itself. The violet clock was not made of metal, but of crystallized wool, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light that matched Cyprian's heartbeat. As he touched it, the clock released a burst of energy that sent a signal to every palm clock in Aurelia, upgrading them once again. Now, people could not only see the weight of their intentions but also the echo of their impact on the lives of others. The logic of the universe had moved beyond individual progress to a state of collective harmony. Cyprian realized that the Bridge of Light was actually a nervous system for the cosmos, carrying information and love between the different realms. He saw a messenger from the ethereal ocean, a star sailor on a bioluminescent dolphin, traveling toward them along a parallel beam of indigo light. They met at the crossroads of the bridge, exchanging a compass of hope for a jar of living dreams. The integration was becoming so complete that the boundaries between the cities began to blur into a single universal civilization. The grand pendulum in Aurelia was now synchronized with the great hourglass in Kronos and the lighthouse in the ethereal ocean. Cyprian and Ignis reached the far end of the bridge, where it entered a portal of pure light leading to the future perfect. In this realm, every second was a masterpiece, and every hour was an eternity of joy and discovery. The Forge Master's violet flame had grown into a solar heart that warmed the entire multiverse, ensuring that the stagnation could never return. The mechanical bird flew ahead of them, its ticking wings creating a path of sonic architecture for others to follow. Peace was the feeling of being exactly where you are supposed to be, at the exact moment you are needed. Cyprian looked back at Aurelia, which now looked like a precious gem set in a crown of starlight. He knew that his journey as an apprentice was over and his life as a master of the spiral had begun. He took the lens of synchronicity and placed it into the center of the violet clock, creating a permanent beacon for all lost travelers. Ignis let out a final, triumphant roar that shook the very fabric of the bridge, turning the glass beneath them into a permanent road of solidified joy. The story was no longer about saving a city, but about the endless expansion of the human heart into the infinite. Every second that passed was a gift, and every breath was a new verse in the song of the stars. The primary spring was now an eternal river, flowing through the hearts of all who dared to dream. And so, they walked into the light, not toward an end, but toward a beginning that would never fade. Everything was in tune, everything was bright, and everything was, at last, one.